I literally don't have her name because in my notes it just says Patrick Wilson and Lorraine Warren. So I did a really good job of prepping this.
Welcome to another episode of The Nerds You're Looking For podcast. We're a nerd culture podcast that discusses nerddom through various segments. You can find us at thenerdspodcast.com, and you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter through our handle at The Nerds Podcast. If you'd like to reach us directly, you can email us at thenerdsyou'relooking4@gmail.com. And additionally, each of us have Letterboxd accounts. If you're interested, Letterboxd is basically just social media for watching movies. So I'm on Letterboxd as that Tyler Hunt. And my co-host, Pat, can be found on Letterboxd under the handle at The Nerds Podcast. So with all that being said, and without further ado, alongside me, as always, is my co-host, Pat Attack. What's up, man? How are you?
I'm good. I am a bit tired. I've talked about this before, but I am an insomniac, like an actual diagnosed insomniac, not just like a thing that I say. But I've been kind of off my sleep schedule lately because, God forbid, I miss a embarrassing Bears loss. They played on Monday Night Football, and that always fucks with my sleep schedule when they play in prime time, because either way, I'm either happy that they won, or in this case, like most seasons, I'm mad that they lost, and they lost in pretty embarrassing fashion. And so I think I saw 1 a.m. that night, and I don't think I've gone to sleep before midnight the last 2 nights. So it's not been great. I haven't enjoyed it, but yeah.
Sorry, man. I think we had this conversation. It was probably off air a couple weeks ago, but it was like, I don't know why I'm excited. I know I'm just going to be upset for 5 or 6 months. And
yeah.
And then, week 1 slaps you in the face.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing meme with the Bears. It's like we're off-season champs for like 3 years in a row, and then you get excited, and then you realize, oh yeah, they're still not very good, and then we have to go through the whole season of them being pretty bad, but also they throw in a couple of good games here and there that give us hope, and then going into next offseason, we do something crazy, and we get a good free agent, or have a good draft, or at least a seemingly good draft, and we just go through the cycle again, and it's pretty big disappointment every year. And I knew that this was going to happen because they played Monday Night Football, and I knew that all eyes were going to be on that game, and the Bears always seem to embarrass themselves when that happens, and it's all anybody wants to talk about for the next couple of days. And so I've been trying to stay off social media and YouTube and a few other things, just because I've been tired of listening. I have eyes. I saw the game. I know that it did not go well. And so it's like, I don't need to hear other people tell me how bad it went. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I am very tired and I have not been sleeping well because I let my mental health be affected by something that I cannot control, and a organization that doesn't seem to win at all. Like, I don't know what curse they're under right now, but they just can't seem to get anything right.
Man, if I didn't know any better, the way that you wax poetically about that, I would have thought that you lost one of your dogs or something.
So I don't like this, but I told somebody this the other day and they thought it was funny, so I'll share it here too. Maybe I've shared this on the podcast before, but my wife, so I normally go to my buddy Mike he kind of dabbles on the Obsessive Viewer. He's a huge Bears fan. He's one of the reasons why I am a Bears fan. I've always kind of rooted for them, relatively speaking, my whole life. I was a big Walter Payton fan and Brian Urlacher, but it wasn't until I met him in like the 6th, 7th grade that I became a big Bears fan. And so we pretty much watch Bears Bears games every week together. Like we take turns going to each other's houses to watch it. And so I was at his house for the Monday night game. And my wife will literally check the score on her phone because she wants to know what Pat is coming home to greet her. Am I going to be happy? Am I going to be sad? I mean, the last 3 seasons, I think they've won a total of like maybe 20 games in 3 seasons. So it's been mostly mad. So yeah, I don't like that she has to, like, she feels the need to do that. Does not make me feel good, but it is what it is. I mean, she still tells the story about the Hail Mary last year, how I reacted to that. And I just like literally laid on our carpeted floor for like a good 10 minutes, like face down on the floor. She's like, I think he might be dead.
Man, this is so depressing. I'm so sorry for you. And yeah, I'm sorry you're having a rough week, man. I hope I know that we don't talk football a ton on the podcast, but for what it's worth, I thought that they looked pretty good. Obviously things didn't go great, but I thought the offense looked better. I thought that it was impressive how Caleb Williams was navigating the pocket that was collapsing on him all the time. So there were some bright spots, and they showed that they can dominate the game at one point. So you guys might have a happier season than you're expecting.
Yeah, I mean, my only hope is that the Vikings defense comes out and plays like they did last year. And it's like, oh, they made some adjustments at halftime and they kind of had Caleb rattled a little bit in halftime. And then it's not going to be like that every week. Yeah. That he just played pretty well at the beginning. They made their adjustments because they also get paid too. And they're a good defense. And they came out to play in the second half. And I mean, again, we can stop. We've talked about football for way too much for a Nerds You're Looking For podcast. But yeah, I do kind of have to remind myself that it's week 1. And we also are, I would say, our 4 best players on defense, 3 of them were out. So we only had our Montez Sweat was the only of the 4 that I would consider our 4 best defensive players. He was the only one that played. So we played pretty well on defense considering.
Well, for the sake of the podcast, I
yes,
hope that
please.
they turn it around. Otherwise, it's going to be a mopey 5 months. So buckle up now. But yeah, I hope that they turn it around for the sake of your mental health as well.
I did have to take a lunchtime nap in my car on Tuesday, so that was funny. People that I work with get a kick out of when I do that. They think it's so weird. I'm like, whatever, man. I'll answer emails and eat my lunch at my desk, and then I'll take my because I have to take an official lunch because I'm still hourly. And so when I'm feeling like I was on Tuesday, I will literally just set an alarm for 30 minutes, walk out to my car, tip the seat all the way back, and just take a good old nap in my car. It's fantastic, actually. I feel so much better afterwards. It's also probably the reason why I continue to sleep poorly, because insomniac and naps isn't usually a very good combo.
Yeah, it's so weird to me that you can lay in bed or on the couch or wherever and not fall asleep, but for 10 minutes in your car in the middle of the day, like no problem. That's so ironic.
Actually, it's something that's pretty frustrating, to be honest with you, and it's something that Chrissy gives me a hard time about. I can fall asleep anywhere. There's been multiple nights where I'll like try to sneak in another movie, like maybe on a Friday or Saturday night, and I will wake up just sitting up on the couch. Like I will just sleep all night just sitting up on the couch, or I fall asleep on planes all the time. In long car rides, I can fall asleep. But like when I'm laying on a bed and it's bedtime, I cannot get my mind to shut down sometimes, but I can fall asleep on my couch. I can fall asleep in my car. I've laid my head on my desk before and taken a little bit of a nap. That's actually why I started doing the car naps, because somebody would come into my office and be like, hey man, like wake the fuck up. So I was like, yeah, that's probably not a good look when somebody would come in and need me for something and I'm sitting there fucking napping on my desk.
Yeah. It's even if you're like, hey, I'm on my lunch break or whatever. It's got a certain.
I do explain that, but it's certainly especially when somebody comes in and like needs me for some like decision, it's not a great look.
Yeah, I'm putting myself in the person who's walking in shoes. Like if I were to do that to somebody at work, and I would be mortified on my end. So I'm sure they feel similarly.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely weird. But then again, one person came in not too long ago and asked me if I was busy, which I clearly was not because I was sleeping, but and asked me if I wanted to make a fantasy football trade. So I don't think that was that important. But yeah, it's happened. It's definitely happened before.
For sure.
All right, man. That can be it for my sleep schedule / football / fantasy football conversation. Let's jump into this episode. If this is your first episode, again, I apologize for that long intro segment. But this first segment is just kind of our excuse to check in with each other. We don't get to talk as much as we used to, and we like to kind of use this first segment as just a way to check in with each other. We call it What We're Into. So what are you into this week?
So kind of a little bit of a behind the scenes story for what I was into. It was one of those weeks where I found myself grasping for straws. And earlier on in the weekend, I settled that I would bite the bullet and watch the Thursday Murder Club on Netflix, because that was a new movie that came out last
as
weekend.
Well.
Okay. I did not finish that. I watched.
I don't think I am just recognizing that I forgot to log it.
No, well, so
your response, I think I might not have logged it.
Yeah, I didn't realize you watched. I haven't checked your letterbox in a while, but yeah, I bring it up because that's not what I'm into. I sat down to watch it and I watched about 30 minutes of it and I was like, this movie is not for me, and I don't think I'm the target audience. I've read
the book and I didn't love the book. Like the concept, the hook of it kind of got me. And I remember not really liking the book. And then as I was watching it, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. It's kind of just like the book. It's very methodical and it's very like, it just kind of feels a little too dry for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think dry is the perfect word. So I had a heart to heart with myself and I'm like, why am I forcing this if I'm not going to enjoy it? And so I ended up backing off of it. And again,
you bringing that up reminded me that I watched it. That's how forgettable it was for me.
Sure.
I completely blocked it from my memory.
Sure. I think that there are certain audiences for it, but I think that they're 30 years older than us. So anyways, I had to obviously come up with something else to talk about. And there are two shows that both wrapped up their most current seasons in the last month that I wanted to touch on quickly. And I know we don't like to double up, but this is quick because they're both shows that have been around for a long time. And they're shows that we've talked about on the podcast previously. So in August, Bob's Burgers wrapped up its 15th season, and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia wrapped up its 17th season. So I don't have anything profound to say about either of these shows in these most recent seasons. Obviously, after this long, you know what you're getting, right? Season 15 of Bob's Burgers is not going to change your opinion on Bob's Burgers either way. It's not a bad season, but it's not a season that's going to make new fans either. I think that if you like the show and you like the formula, you're going to like this season. I think that Bob's Burgers, and I don't know what it is about it. I think animated shows, the longer they go on, the more stretched thin they get plot-wise, and they typically fall off from a quality standpoint after a while. I think The Simpsons is notable, even though I haven't watched it in the last decade or so, if not longer, so I can't really have an opinion there. But I think it's fair to say that most shows that go on for a long extended time drop off in quality. And the thing about Bob's Burgers is I don't feel like it ever has. I think it's been steady. And because of that, it's very much, and I'm going to probably say this about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia as well, but it feels like a warm hug. Like I've been watching this show since before Brittany and I were married. And when we got married, we started watching the show together. And so we've watched this show together for the last 11 years. And it's nice that it's continuing to go on. And the thing with Bob's Burgers is it's not a kid's show, but I feel like they pulled back on the raunchiness a lot as the show went on. And so I can sit there with my kid in the room and not worry that it's going to be something really outrageous that he's going to pick up on that he shouldn't see yet. Like he likes the song, he likes the characters, but he doesn't really pay attention to what's going on, and that's great. So it's like a perfect balance show for us. It's a perfect like, hey, is there a new Bob's? Let's turn it on and just kind of veg out to that tonight, because it makes everybody happy in a way. So, there's a lot to be said about steady entertainment, and Bob's Burgers is definitely all reliable. I'm not going to go through and necessarily pick and choose episodes, but there is one episode that I want to mention that stood out to me, and it's actually the season finale. It's called Insomnibob, and this is an episode that it doesn't get too emotional. Like I think Bob's Burgers can only get so emotional, but it's got this really profound story for Bob specifically, and it's ironic. I planned to bring this episode up before you talked about your insomnia. So in this episode, if you can't tell by the title, Bob is struggling with insomnia, and it results in him like trying to get back to his culinary roots, and he's up in the kitchen every night, like working on like this outlandish dish. He's trying to make this burger that will cement his legacy, but it's not too big of a spoiler. By the time that the episode's done and you get around to the message of it, he realizes that his legacy isn't this burger, it's his family and his kids. And so,
sure,
it goes down a more sappy path than this show typically does, and it worked. So, I'm glad this show's still around. I'm glad it's going to continue to stick around. I think it's a show that a lot of people, if they're just channel surfing, if that's even a thing anymore, if you come across a new episode of Bob's Burgers, you stick to it. So the other show, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, it kind of the same situation, right? Like, I don't think that after 17 years, season 17 is going to necessarily bring in new fans, but this show has had, I don't even want to say ups and downs, because I don't think the downs were that down, but there are a lot of people that complain about the quality of some of the seasons, especially once they hit like 9 or 10. But I think that they really pulled themselves out of that trench, and the last few years have been really good. And I think it's probably because they're doing fewer episodes and they're taking off extended amounts of times between seasons at this point. Obviously, the cast has a bunch of other shit they're doing. Rob Mack, he owns a fucking football club at this point, or co-owns it. So they all have other things, but it's nice and refreshing that they still get together and do this creatively every few years. Even more so than Bob's. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia has been on since I was in high school. And so It's like the one thing that makes me not feel old is that even though the show started in like 2006, so I think it started about 20 years ago, and I should definitely feel old, it's nice to still have it around. And this season, I think that what works a lot for it is it gets back to the basics. There are some episodes that feel like what I would say is classic Always Sunny. So there's an episode where the gang goes to a dog track. The episode is called The Gang Goes to a Dog Track. And it felt very reminiscent of episodes you would have gotten in the early seasons in a good way. Like, it was really funny and it felt like classic It's Always Sunny. But then they also do some kind of new or weirder stuff this season too. So like the first episode is the companion episode to their team up with Abbott Elementary. So there was an episode of the last season of Abbott Elementary that had the gang in it, and now this was an episode of Always Sunny with the Abbott Elementary folks. I don't watch that show. I've heard it's great, but I will say, like, the one saving grace that made me laugh in that show, not really understanding what was going on, is one of the Abbott Elementary teachers drops the C word. And so, the fact that show is on ABC and that character is saying that on a mature rated show was just funny to me. But there's also some episodes later in the season that involves like Frank going on the Golden Bachelor, and it might sound kind of hacky and kind of like a Hail Mary for them to throw by bringing reality TV into it and having Frank go on this show, because it's just such an outlandish concept that they would even have him on this show. But it really works. It sets up some really, really funny stuff, especially with the gang in Philly while Frank's away doing this. And I don't know, man, it's only 8 episodes, but it's nice to get this every few years, and it still maintains its quality from my standpoint. So yeah, both of these shows are obvious recommends for me. But if you've not caught up or if you've gotten behind on either of these shows, I would say that they're both good ones to catch up on.
Yeah, I am behind on both of these. I actually was surprised because I went through, coincidentally, not too long ago, I went through It's Always Sunny, and I wasn't as far behind as I thought. I thought I was like 3 seasons behind, and it turns out I was only like 1 season behind. I mean, not including the one, so I guess technically I'm 2 seasons behind now, because I don't think this season had started yet when I looked at that, or maybe it had just started. And I haven't done that for Bob's Burgers, but I said I'd imagine I was caught up when the movie came out, but that was probably 2 years ago, I think, somewhere around there,
if not longer. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I'm at least 2 seasons behind on Bob's Burgers.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The writer's strike from a couple years ago really prolonged this season. So the season's like 25 episodes, but they were released in the course of like a year. So season 16 of Bob's Burgers actually starts in like 2 or 3 weeks. So there was only a month between seasons this time around, which is kind of strange. But yeah, you're about to be 3 seasons behind.
Yeah, I should definitely get caught up, because that was a Nerd Year's resolution, to get caught up on like the shows that I love, but I easily get caught or get backed up on, like Rick and Morty and Bob's Burgers and It's Always Sunny. For whatever reason, I always find that I know the reason. It's because they're weekly shows, and that's just not how I watch TV anymore. So it's really easy for me to get behind on that stuff, and especially those are the shows that Chrissy doesn't watch. So it's really hard for me to keep up on TV that Chrissy's not interested in.
Yeah, man, I feel that. But what are you into this week?
So I actually had the opposite. I forgot that I watched Thursday Murder Club, so I guess I could have talked about that, but I completely forgot about that. So that's probably good that I didn't plan on talking about that. But I actually had 2 other things that I planned on talking about. One being Hollow Knight Silk Song, which I've about 15-ish hours into, but I don't feel like I've gotten enough into it to talk about it on the podcast. And then what I really wanted to talk about this episode, which should come as no surprise, The Office spinoff The Paper, which we are currently watching, but my wife's been busting her ass at work lately, and our schedules just haven't really lined up. And so we binged a good chunk of it a few days ago, but we haven't been back since. That's not a reflection on the show. It's just our schedules have not been syncing up lately the last couple of days, and so we haven't been able to finish it. So I will definitely be talking about it next week, and I'm very excited to talk about it next week. So that'll be something that we'll get to next episode. But the thing that was kind of my backup's backup was a movie that I went and saw kind of out of the blue. I wasn't expecting to go see it, but surprisingly it made it a couple of weeks in the theater. And I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'm definitely, this is it. Cause it only had one showing one day. I was like, it's not going to make it another week. And I don't think it did. So I'm glad that I saw it. And the movie I'm referring to is Relay, which is probably not a film that most people, well, maybe if you're listening to this podcast, you've heard of this movie, but it is the new film from David Mackenzie, who is not a name I'm super familiar with, but he has done one of the best like modern Westerns made in the last 10 years. And that film is Hell or High Water, which was one of my favorite films the year that it came out. I actually looked, but I think it was the year before I started doing my best of list on Letterboxd, so I couldn't find where exactly Hell or High Water fit on that list, but I guarantee you it was definitely in the top 5, if not higher, that year that it came out. I fucking love that movie. I watch it periodically, probably annually. At some point, I'll watch it every year. I love that movie. So I was definitely into this just based on the fact that it was his movie. Relay follows Sarah Grant, played by Lily James, who initially planned on becoming a whistleblower against a pharmaceutical company who was covering up the results of their new genetically modified wheat. However, she gets cold feet after they send goons to harass her. When the legal system can't help her, she turns to a fixer named Ash, played by Riz Ahmed, who works as an intermediator between Sarah and the thugs harassing her. So this is kind of becoming a trend for me, which I kind of like, to be honest with you. It kind of goes counter to a lot of stuff we talk about on this podcast, but I literally knew nothing about this film going into it, except for I knew it was a David Mackenzie film. That's obviously what drew me to it originally. And then I found out Riz Ahmed was in it, who is an actor that I really enjoy as well. So I was like, okay, those are the only two things I knew. I literally didn't see a trailer. I did not know anything. I didn't even know Lily James was in this movie. I just knew those two things, and that was all I really needed. That was good enough for me. And I will say, from the jump, this film does a really great job at getting you bought in really early. Except for, I mean, it did that for me. It starts off with this really interesting scene where this clearly shady business deal is going down. And then after that deal goes down, Riz Ahmed is following this dude that just did this handoff. And it kind of is very ambiguous very early on. Is he following him because he's going to like mug him? Is he following him to do harm to this guy? Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? That sort of thing. And then shortly after that scene, there's another where you see Ash, Riz Ahmed's character, doing some odd shit while he's listening to this voicemail. And in this voicemail, the guy calls him a scum, like a scum parasite or something like that. And so you're immediately, at least I was when I was watching this, I was like, what the fuck is happening there? It's very ambiguous, but it does it in a way that you are like, I want to know more. Like, it's really interesting. I want to peel back these layers. And then those scenes are followed by Lily James, who gives a great performance, as well as Riz Ahmed also gives a great performance. And her character, Sarah Grant, tells this really heartbreaking story to this lawyer who can't help her, but she basically tells him this story about how she wanted to do the right thing, but now she fears for her life, and the thugs kind of burnt her car down and has kind of been harassing her, and she just kind of wants to give this information back and just kind of wants to start clean and wants to start over. And this is how she gets connected with Ash's character. And after that scene, once she meets him, it kind of turns into this, I don't want to say spy thriller, but it had that same vibe to it. It's very cloak and dagger, spy-ish type of film. There's this really interesting scene in the airport where he's like using the intercom to like send signals to her, and then the thugs that are following her are trying to do the same thing, and like this cat and mouse game. It's really interesting. There's a big chunk of this early to mid film where these hired thugs led by Sam Worthington, which it was cool to see him in movies. I don't see him in movies very often. So it was kind of cool to see him not in an Avatar movie, because it's been a minute since I've seen him in a movie that wasn't Avatar. And it's kind of just like these chunks of scenes that you see where the thugs led by Sam Worthington are tracking Sarah, who is being helped by Ash, and he's always like one step ahead of them and is always kind of being able to like trick them. And there's a couple of scenes where he kind of cuts it close and he almost gets caught. There's one scene. So the hook of this movie, I should have mentioned earlier, is that in order to kind of keep secret and not being able to track with the cell phones and everything and this is hence the name of the movie, is Ash uses a relay system. I didn't know that this existed. I don't know if it's actually a real thing, but I'd imagine it probably is if it's in this movie, where it's mostly made for hearing impaired people. So they can type messages out and somebody will relay that information to somebody on a telephone. So you're basically just typing out to a person, like a telemarketer, essentially, that type of like call center vibe, and then that person will tell the person. And there's a lot of that. That's how Sarah and Ash communicate in this movie, and it's really smart because obviously that way they can't track where he is, what his phone number is, and all that stuff, because he's calling the relay system, and then they're communicating that information to Sarah. There's even a moment where Sam Worthington and his crew go to the relay system, like the offices, and they're like, yeah, I can't. You can get a warrant, but there's nothing to get. We don't keep call logs. We don't record. We don't do anything. So it's actually really smart that he does this. And so there's that hook of the film, is like, there's this really interesting way that he kind of does this like cat and mouse, like cloak and dagger type of thing that he does. So he's always kind of like one step ahead of these thugs, and it's really interesting to kind of see him outsmart them. And there's a couple of moments where he has to cut it close because he has this emergency where he needs to get a hold of Sarah, but he doesn't have time to like do it through the relay system. So he pretends that he's the relay person because she doesn't know his voice because they never actually communicated before. And then he has to take his battery out and like dump the burner cell phone. It's a whole thing. And so I know that this expression gets thrown around liberally, but I was literally on the edge of my seat watching, I would say, the first half of this movie. Like, it's a lot of that. And of course, you're rooting for these characters, mostly because Lily James had that great performance early on where she kind of pours her heart out. And there's a lot of, and I don't want to say it's like rom-com, but that's the best way to describe it. There's a lot of like, as they have more conversations, they start to get to know each other, and they start to have like, they share some personal details and kind of chit chat with each other because they're the only ones that they can really talk to. And so there's kind of like that character development throughout this entire movie. I will say that the middle of the movie sort of slows down a little bit towards the middle, just doing those conversations. They spend a lot of time. And honestly, if a movie's going to slow down, I would rather it slow down for character development. So I definitely appreciate that. And that does kind of pay off in the third act. So I did appreciate that for sure. I will say that it is impossible. And I know that there's a thought out there, and maybe some of our listeners will agree with this, that even mentioning that there's a twist in this movie is kind of a spoiler. But there's no way I can talk about my thoughts about this movie without mentioning there is a third act twist. I'm not going to say that I completely saw it coming because I didn't exactly see what happens coming, but there were a couple of jumps in plot that this film made that didn't really make a whole lot of sense and kind of were like mini red flags to me that something wasn't exactly, like, it didn't pass the sniff test for me. And so I thought something weird was happening in this movie. And then there is a twist. And first of all, I have two problems with the twist. And it does kind of, it did kind of deteriorate some of the like goodwill that this film had for me. I was really, really digging this movie. But the first problem I had is there's a lot of scenes early on in the movie, scenes that I otherwise really enjoyed early in the film that don't really make a whole lot of sense based on what we know after the twist. How those characters acted in those scenes does not match up. They wanted you to think a certain way, and they made characters act a certain way to trick you so the twist would be bigger. And that's not great filmmaking. I mean, it's great until you see the twist, and then you're like, if you think about it for 30 seconds, you'll be like, those scenes don't make sense anymore. So it doesn't really have much replay value, or rewatch value, I should say, because that part doesn't make sense anymore, why they would act like that if they had this ace up their sleeve, essentially. And second of all, I don't really, and I should argue more importantly, I don't really like the idea, the thought behind this movie because of that twist. So from my perspective, it feels like this movie, the theme of this movie, the kind of the message this movie is trying to send is the world is an ugly place. You should protect yourself. You should protect your family and friends. But at the same time, you also have to trust people at a certain point. And Riz Ahmed's character, Ash, takes the I don't trust everybody, or I don't trust anybody. Corporations are evil, people are evil, to a extreme. Like, he is so careful with everything that he does. And then he starts to open up, and then he gets fucked because he opens up to the world. And I just don't know if that's the message that I think that movie should be telling people, is like, by the way, you should protect everybody that you care. You should protect yourself and everybody that you care about. The world is a terrible place. And if you trust anybody, you're going to get fucked. And I just don't know if that's a message that I think that people should gather from a movie like this. So, I mean, I'm still going to give it a 3.5 stars out of 5 stars. So I still enjoyed the movie. I still think it's a well-made movie. It does a really good job, like I said earlier, getting you hooked immediately. There's a lot of really cool cat and mouse scenes that, again, don't really make a whole lot of sense once you know the twist. But the scenes themselves are really well shot, and it's really, really well written. Riz Ahmed and Lily James are great in it. And so I do think it's worth a watch. Just kind of damper your expectations, I guess.
Yeah, no, I saw this was playing in a limited release and it looked interesting. So it was like a flash in the pan up here as well. I didn't get the opportunity to see it the week it was here, but I'll probably catch it once it's available at home for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely suggest it.
Cool, man. You ready for nerd news?
Yeah, what do you got this week?
A couple trailers. Almost immediately when we got done recording last week, they released the 28 Years Later Bone Temple trailer.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, it comes out this January. Looks like it is picking up right where the last movie left off. So, I don't know, man. It looks good. I didn't realize, I'm sure I knew at one point, but I had forgotten that Nia DaCosta is directing this. And she's great. And so I have no doubts that she's going to pick up where Danny Boyle left off with the last one. It looks like it's kind of treading on some zombie tropes, which you've seen before, which is like, oh, they're becoming sentient. And
yeah, like Day of the Dead sort of thing.
Yeah, and like, oh, fear of the living, not the dead, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I kind of roll my eyes at that a little bit, but the cast is awesome. It's written by Alex Garland. It's hard to imagine it's not going to be good.
Yeah, so I feel like the consensus around 28 Years Later, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, is that they didn't stick the landing. That's what I like. I think from what I gather is the people that didn't like it liked most of it, and they just didn't like the ending. And it feels like that's what this movie is. It's just like, oh, we're picking up where we left off, but we're kind of diving more into the Ray Fiennes stuff and the big dick zombie stuff. And
sure,
which you're welcome. You have the title for this episode. Yeah, so it does feel like they're leaning into that stuff. And I feel like a lot of people aren't gonna like that, but I didn't mind it so much. So I'm excited. I liked that movie, I think, more than consensus did.
Yeah, same for sure. So yeah, luckily we'll have to wait till January for it. So
yeah.
All right. We also got a trailer for Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out story, which comes out in theaters Thanksgiving and then on Netflix like a week after. Did you see this trailer?
I did. I feel like it just kind of does what I almost called it a glass onion. It's what's the actual, you just said it, Knives Out. I got confused by the second one. Anyways, it feels like exactly what they should do with a movie like this, which is just highlight the cast. And that's kind of what this trailer does. And doesn't, obviously it's not going to give anything away per se, but like, I think it just does what it needs to do, which is to show all the really good actors and actresses that are in this movie. And that's all I really need.
Yeah, same. I appreciate the aesthetic of this one, like the gothic atmosphere, the cemetery,
absolutely,
church, that kind of stuff. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's the third time for this character, and I'll watch it every time because I think murder mysteries are fun, and I think the Benoit Blanc character is cool too, and funny and eccentric. So I'm into it.
Yeah. All
right. We also got more information quickly about what the future of Superman looks like. So we were hypothesizing a few weeks ago, and then James Gunn let it rip that there is a Superman sequel entitled Man of Tomorrow coming out in June of 2027. June or July. Sorry, I didn't write down the date, but it's coming out summer 2027, which is 2 years after the first one, obviously. But he also teased plot details this week, saying that it was going to see Superman and Lex Luthor team up reluctantly against a bigger threat. and the comic art that he used to announce the movie was Superman from the comics and Lex Luthor in his green mech suit. So it's safe to assume that will make its debut in this movie as well. But that's crazy. We're getting Superman this year, Supergirl next year, and then Man of Tomorrow the year after. It's quick.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously really enjoyed the Superman movie that we got this year more than I thought I would enjoy a Superman movie, but it is James Gunn, and I like all of the stuff, all of the comic book stuff that he does. So I guess I shouldn't be as surprised as I was, but yeah, I am definitely looking forward to it. I'm less excited for the Supergirl stuff. That character has never really interested me as much as like Superman doesn't really interest me as a character either. So yeah, I'm less excited for that, but I mean, it's cool that we're getting a lot of these new DC universe stuff pretty rapid fire.
So funny enough, the week before last, I just finished the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow graphic novel, which is the source material written by Tom King for this adaptation of Supergirl they're doing. And I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. I don't want to build up hype.
I mean,
for
Tom
something.
King's awesome. So
yeah, they explore layers to that character I would have never even thought of,
Okay, cool.
I won't even get into it, but I think we're in for a good time next year. I'm optimistic.
Cool.
All right. We also got some casting news. Sophie Turner will be our next Lara Croft. So she's been tapped to play the character in the upcoming Tomb Raider series that Phoebe Waller-Bridge is developing. And I honestly had forgotten that this was a Phoebe Waller-Bridge project. So I had
as well.
Yeah. So I was like, Sophie Turner got announced and I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. Like, I'm sure we'll watch it and review it. But then her being attached to it from a creative standpoint has me really intrigued. So I don't know, man. I like Sophie Turner. She's not shown up in a whole lot post Game of Thrones, but I'm interested to see her take on the character.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they've taken so many bites at that apple, though, that yes, I'm a little bit more intrigued by this, given the creative force behind it. But I don't know, man. I just feel like at a certain point, you kind of have to throw in the towel. I mean, they're not going to because it's an IP that they can probably milk, and that's what they're going to do because they're in the business of making money. But I don't know, man. It just, at a certain point, you kind of have to forget about it.
Sure. All right. It's kind of two stories in one. But this past weekend, The Conjuring had the third highest grossing horror film ever. I didn't word that right, but it became, in its opening weekend, the third highest grossing horror film in its opening weekend ever. So it made $84 million in the United States, and then it made $110 million outside of the United States. And this is a rated R horror movie, so pretty unprecedented.
I mean, I went and saw this last night. There were plenty of little kids in that movie.
Really?
Yeah.
I got ID checked.
Really?
And so did Brittany. Yeah, we went and saw it together. There's this one lady.
The children that work at the movie theater I go to don't give a fuck.
No, I don't even get ID'd for A-list most of the time. Sorry if I'm ruining my AMC spot. But there's a lady that's at the door every so often, and she is a stickler. So she checks your ID for A-list, which is fine. But yeah, I'm like obviously in my mid-30s, and she's wanting to make sure I'm 17 years old. So I thought that was funny. But I digress. Oh, I should probably also. I was in a sold out show, and the other show.
I was also in a sold out show because I didn't get to see it Monday night like I normally do because of the fucking Bears game.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I had to go see it on Tuesday, which is $5 movie ticket day, and so it was fucking packed.
Yeah, I don't want to one up you. But take into consideration, my theater doesn't have recliner seats. And so I went to get 7 o'clock showing tickets, or I went to get 7:45 showing tickets at 7 o'clock on the app. I saw the 7 o'clock was sold out, and the app wasn't letting me buy our tickets for 7:45, and I finally got it to go through. But I was like, man, this is gonna fucking suck.
Yeah,
and we'll get to that in our review. But on the heels of The Conjuring Last Rites having such a successful box office opening, it appears that they are potentially developing a Conjuring TV series at HBO Max, and they are also potentially exploring prequels, which I kind of read the tea leaves on that once they introduced new young actors for Ed and Lorraine in this movie. So I think that you got to let it lie, but money talks. So
yeah. I mean, as soon as you started talking about how much money it made, I'm like, oh well, this is. I hadn't heard about this, but as soon as you started saying, I was like, oh, they're just gonna keep making more movies. I mean, they obviously made it. Last is in the title, but that doesn't mean anything. And the way that they ended this movie doesn't really mean anything. So like, just because they put the words on the screen that made it very final doesn't mean that they can't squeeze in another movie. They don't give a shit about that. So I'm happy. Happy is too strong of a word. I'm glad that at least they're planning on sticking with this being the last chronological movie that they're going to make. But I mean, we'll get into it here in a second. And I imagine that this is the last nerd news story, hence the reason you brought it up when you did. So we can kind of transition to our review. But yeah, I mean, we'll get into it here in a little bit. But I don't know if I got another Conjuring movie in me.
Sure. So with that being said,
let's get into Conjuring the Last Rites, which is a new film from Michael Chavez. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his last name, who has done several films in the Conjuring universe, most notably because it's the movie right before this one. He did The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. There's also several credited screenwriters on this movie and a couple of people that got story credits as well, which to me usually means that it's going to be kind of a disjointed film, kind of too many cooks in the kitchen. And for anyone that's not picking up what I'm putting down, that's foreshadowing of my review of this movie. But so before we get to that, this movie starts off by showing, as Tyler mentioned, a young Ed and Lorraine Warren, played first by Orrin Smith and Madison Lawler, who I'd imagine is going to be the stars of those prequels that you mentioned. And then eventually, as this movie gets out of that first scene, played, of course, once again by Patrick Wilson. And I literally don't have her name because in my notes, it just says Patrick Wilson and Lorraine Warren. So I did a really good job of prepping this.
Vera Farmiga.
Yes. So that's funny. Anyways, apparently I was also very sleepy when I prepped that synopsis earlier today. So that makes sense. So anyways, Ed and Lorraine, who during one of their early cases, Lorraine unexpectedly goes into premature labor with their daughter Judy, played by Maya Tomlinson. Due to fear caused by almost losing their daughter during birth, the couple never returns to that case. However, that case later comes back to haunt them literally and figuratively when their close friend gets caught up with a case with a Pennsylvania family. So there was a time, I think both of us, where we both would get really psyched for a new mainline Conjuring film. As you can suggest by how I've been kind of leading this review, that for me, that time has passed for me. I didn't really like The Devil Made Me Do It. I liked the second Conjuring movie. I really haven't liked most of the other side stuff that isn't like the mainline movies. And honestly, I'd forgotten that they were going to make another movie until like a few weeks ago when I started seeing the promo material for this movie. Then a few days before I went and saw this movie, I saw the runtime and I was like, fuck, this movie's going to be a chore to watch.
Yeah, I was in a similar headspace for sure. I think that we have a lot of similar opinions on this series. I think that I may like some of the side stuff more than you. I think a couple of the Annabelle movies are pretty good, and I don't know why, but I have a soft spot for The Nun. I think going back to that like gothic aesthetic, it's something I really like. But similar to what you said, The Devil Made Me Do It was a big disappointment. I really remember being excited for that because it looked like it was going to be like a legal drama with horror in it. And that's obviously not what it was. And so that dampened my expectations for this one quite a bit. But, you know, I enjoy these movies enough, and I'm close enough to October that I was good with an appetizer for the horror season.
Yeah, man. I mean, I wanted this movie to be good, just like I want every movie that I go see to be good. But there was a lot of red flags, and
sure.
I had a feeling about this one. So let's actually get into it. So as we do with the episode as a whole, we like to break these reviews down into different segments. This first segment is just kind of a general overview. We'll break down the story and performances, all that stuff later. We call this first segment Broad Strokes. So how'd you feel about The Conjuring The Last Rites?
Yeah, man. I mean, you've set the table, right? It's not great. It's pretty disjointed. They lean into some things that I'll talk about shortly that I thought were bizarre things to lean into, but I do have some positive stuff too. And the positive thing was, believe it or not, the theater experience was fucking awesome.
It was the exact opposite for me.
So yeah, I would prefer to watch movies in a theater by myself, except for comedies and horror movies, because I think those are better with a crowd experience. And despite there being 100 people in this theater or whatever the fuck it was, everyone was a good moviegoer for the most part. And so having a theater full of people get scared and react at the same time was a lot of fun, because if there's one thing that sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, what would they get scared at?
What do you mean?
I was making a joke because I don't think this movie was scary at all.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, but I mean, say what you will about the Conjuring movies. Apparently you will, and you don't think they're scary. I
don't think this movie is scary.
I wouldn't say that this movie was scary, but there were jump scares that were jarring. And to react to that with a bunch of other people was like this communal theater going experience, and I really enjoyed it. But that could almost be said with about any movie with a jump scare if you see it in a theater like that, or with a lot of jump scares. It doesn't mean it's a good movie. It doesn't even mean it's a good horror movie, because if I watch this on my couch next month when it most likely will hit streaming, like, I'm not going to have that same experience, and it's just going to make the plot holes and the things I hated about this movie even more prevalent. So my overall rating could be skewed a little bit when we get to it by my theater experience, but still not a good movie. Not I would say probably worse than The Devil Made Me Do It as well.
I honestly don't really remember much from The Devil Made Me Do It. I remember being disappointed, and that was pretty much it. I will say, as far as my theater experience, I normally share these stories in the intro, but I wasn't going to, because it's not much of a story, but I did have a pretty bad theater experience. But it was so packed, and everyone was being shit about, just like chit-chatting the whole movie, that it's like, whatever, I can't yell at the 100 people that are in this fucking theater right now. So it's like, the people sitting right next to me were talking pretty much the entire movie. Like, I mean, they would stop every so often, and we'd have a good 10-minute stretch here and there, but they were talking pretty much the whole time. But a bunch of people were talking, so it's like, whatever. Somebody's phone kept going off, and they just like weren't turning it off, and it's just like, it was bad. But anyways, I will say that there's a couple of like genuinely kind of like cute, like sort of jokes in this movie, and people would laugh. And that was kind of fun, seeing a movie. Like, I didn't get scared. I don't think really anyone got scared in the theater with me. And so I didn't really have that type of experience. I will say that there's one moment that somebody in the theater thought was really funny, where I think it would have had to been Ed, made a joke about making waffles and somebody in the theater really thought that was funny. So that was kind of cute. But outside of that, my theater going experience was pretty bad. Again, I blame the Bears for it. I blame the Bears for a lot of things right now, but that's beside the point. So getting into my broad strokes. So one way that you can spot a good AI video is it doesn't have continuity. Like one scene to another. Like if it cuts, it won't have continuity from the scene before it. And I kind of felt like I might be watching an AI movie to a certain extent watching this movie. Obviously, I don't think this movie was made for AI. I'm being hyperbolic for the fun of it. But things just kind of happen in this movie. I don't really understand some of it. Like it kind of felt like they were throwing up everything against the wall to see what sticks. This movie kind of meanders. It almost kind of feels like they were trying to figure out what this movie was while they were filming it, which I thought was kind of odd. There's like entities or ghosts in this movie that they try to justify by like this really weird scene towards the end of the movie, but they're like literally only in this movie for the jump scares that I didn't think were very effective, and I don't typically think jump scares are all that scary to begin with, but like there's no reason for these ghosts or entities to really be in the movie. They don't really make sense in the overall like mythology of what was happening. I don't really know what was happening, to be completely honest. Again, there was a lot of like things that they suggest, and I'll kind of be more specific once we start diving into the story, but it definitely felt like they had like a bunch of little ideas and they just didn't really have an overarching story that they wanted to tell. So they just kind of cut and paste a bunch of bullshit, in my opinion, into this movie. And this movie kind of meanders from one thing to another. I will say that, and I say this a lot in a lot of my reviews, deep down, I do think that there's a few things that I did think were kind of interesting, because these are people that have made other movies. They are professional filmmakers. So it's like they still know how to make a movie. So there are still things in this movie that I did find interesting. But when you throw 100 things at the wall, there's going to be a few things that I'm going to think are interesting. I don't agree with some of the things that they decided to focus on, but I think some of the stuff was interesting. Honestly, I think for about 80% of the movie, it felt like we were watching two completely different movies. You were kind of watching the Warrens, and then you were kind of watching this other family in Pennsylvania, and they really don't come together until the last 20-ish minutes of this over 2-hour movie, which again, I don't mean to bring up runtime. I know we tend to bring it up a lot. There's two genres that you've already brought up that there is no fucking reason why a movie, either a comedy or a horror, should be more than 2 hours long. This movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes long. I don't know if there's like a stinger or anything after the credits, because I didn't stay. As soon as they said directed by, I'm not going to butcher his last name again, I got up and got the fuck out of there as quickly as I could. So I don't know anything about that. But like, yeah, this movie shouldn't have been as long as it did. They had a bunch of shit that didn't really make a whole lot of sense, kind of tied together in the laziest way possible. And to make matters worse, and we'll get into this when we really dig into the horror later, it's one of the lamest final showdowns I have ever seen in a horror film. I am not kidding you. They literally fight a mirror. That is how this movie ends. They fight a fucking mirror. So yeah, I did not like this movie at all.
Fair.
All right, so let's dive into the story. Obviously, with a Conjuring movie, I think the most appropriate thing to start with is talking about Ed and Lorraine.
Yeah, I was trying to think of something profound to say here, but they're at this point, they are a seasoned and steady married couple, and they're facing age, right? And so the big point of friction in this movie is that Ed can't keep doing what they're doing because of heart problems.
But isn't that something they did in the third movie, though? I vaguely remember them talking about that in the third movie.
he has those pills in the first movie for sure. So it's a carryover point. But I was, like I said, I was trying to think of something new to say. I don't have a problem with necessarily their relationship or their journey, but there was one thing that I had a problem with, and maybe I didn't pay attention enough in the first two specifically, but Lorraine's powers or her medium abilities have become almost like superpowers at this point. Like it feels like you're watching an X-Men movie whenever she's doing her weird shit. And that didn't really sit with me. Like if I can make peace with spiritual stuff. I say it all the time. Raised Catholic, even though I don't believe in that kind of stuff anymore, it's in my DNA. So I can get behind this kind of horror with demons and all of that shit. And I can even suspend disbelief enough to say like, okay, she's a medium and she can sense things other people can't. But when it starts to become a superpower, which is how I feel like it's displayed in this movie, it's where I draw the line, I guess. And so even that aspect of it wasn't working for me here.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that you brought up her powers, because this is a point that I was going to make separately from just her powers, but I think it does kind of fit into it, and this is not necessarily the fault of these particular filmmakers, because you're making the fourth in this mainline film series, but you have to, and this is just a problem that movies in general have, because you're making individual movies, but you're also making movies that are part of a franchise. You have to continue raising the stakes. And I think by giving her more and more powers, or making her powers more and more powerful, it's just kind of their way of raising the stakes. And I felt like they did that with the beginning of this movie, because they did that like text dump where it's like, oh, this is the case that ended their career or whatever. And I remember thinking towards the end of the movie, I was like, when is this going to become serious? Because it didn't really feel like even though the text told me that the stakes were raised, I just never really felt like the stakes were actually raised. So that I think that's just a problem with movie franchises in general, that you constantly have to kind of make this the biggest threat that they've seen so far. And obviously it's not. Obviously the most interesting movie is always going to be the first one, because that's why they told that as the first movie, because they would like to make a franchise out of this, but they don't know. So that you got to kind of come out swinging with the first movie. And so, yeah, it's by the fourth film, you're going to just have that issue. And then the film, again, just never was going to live up to those stakes. I do kind of like, and this will kind of lead us into the second character that I want to talk about. But I do kind of like bringing Judy into the fold, and the idea of her kind of being their miracle baby and trying to protect her. And I do think that her with Lorraine is kind of an interesting dynamic. Her seeing, obviously being her mother, she sees a lot of Judy in her just biologically, but also having similar powers. I thought was kind of interesting. So we can just kind of transition into talking about Judy as a character as well.
Yeah, I didn't dislike the Judy character in this movie. I think that she had probably the most personality out of a lot of characters in this movie, especially Ed and Lorraine. You know, they're kind of stiff as a board in a lot of ways, and so Judy brings some energy in that regard. But I also think that there's some cool moments with her where like the past movies are catching up with her. Annabelle's in this movie. I don't think it's a spoiler to say. And even though they maybe do some cringy stuff with it, I think it's an interesting idea that she's been haunted by the idea of this doll or this demon since she was little. And we saw her as a kid in those movies. But yeah, at least they tried to do something with her character. She had a boyfriend that becomes her fiance, and she's going through this stuff that she doesn't understand, and she wants to help. And so it's the place where they probably tried to do the most character stuff. But unfortunately, some of the stuff that you were talking about in broad strokes really peeks through with her story, especially. Like there's a point in the movie where it's super jarring, where she just winds up in Pennsylvania. Like, you know that's the route that they're going to be going, is that the Warrens are going to go help the Smurls in Pennsylvania, but there's no like scene where the character's really thinking about it or talking about it or contemplating it. It's just this jarring scene later. They can't find her and she's in Pennsylvania. And it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And for a movie that's 2 hours and 15 minutes long, you should not have gaps like that. That's very strange.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And that was one of the things that really bugged me about this movie. Honestly, there's a couple of things. I mean, one, I guess I shouldn't have said this with Judy, but like there's another situation where somebody gets possessed, a character gets possessed, and then they hang themselves, and then they're not possessed anymore. And it's just like, okay, I guess that's over. Like, is it because the character died and they brought that character back by using CPR, and now because they died, I shouldn't have to do that mental gymnastics to try to figure that out, though. Like, so there's a lot of things like that happen in this movie where it's just like, okay, yeah, that just kind of happened. And so Judy definitely has that where she goes to Pennsylvania for no fucking reason. I know, again, they try to justify it. Like, they try to justify a lot of things in this movie by just having a character say, like, this is what happened. And Judy kind of says, like, oh, I had a feeling. And yeah, that's just not good enough, man. Especially, again, like you said, not to bring up the runtime for like the 100th time already, but like this movie, 2 hours and 15 minutes. Like, you're trying to hold somebody's attention for that long. You need to have a better flow with the plot. But like I said earlier, I do like the idea of her having her mother's abilities and kind of them trying to figure that out together, and her mom trying to protect her from it and that sort of thing. I thought that the like little rhyme thing was kind of cute until you hear her do it like 1,000 fucking times in this movie. I was like, I fucking get it. Like, I don't need to hear it 1,000,000 fucking times. So that was a little annoying. I did actually really like, I didn't bring him up as a separate character to talk about, but I wanted to fit him in. I actually did like the character of Tony, which is her boyfriend, eventually her fiance. Yeah. I thought that they kind of had a cute relationship. I especially appreciated his relationship with Ed and trying to prove himself. I will say that there's a weird moment early on in the movie with Tony where he's introduced to a character in, I think it was actually the father character, the priest character. And he's like, oh yeah, I in between jobs, I was a police officer. And he's like, oh, why'd you quit? And he's like, oh, it's a long story. And then you hear that story and it's actually not that long of a story. And it's also not that like, it's not like, I mean, obviously it would be traumatic for Tony's character. I'm not saying it wouldn't be, but it's like, oh, that's a thing that you probably would deal with a lot as a police officer. You're kind of putting yourself in that position. And so, yeah, it just, I don't know. I just didn't really buy that part of the character. And so it just didn't really feel like it was that like monumental of a story. And so, yeah, I didn't particularly like that, but I liked Tony as a character. And I thought him and Judy's relationship was pretty cool. But you mentioned the Pennsylvania family, the Smurls, and that is the last story beat that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I think that when you meet the Smurls, there's a glimmer of hope for what those characters are going to be. They start to lay the foundation for what could have potentially been some interesting family dynamics. But once you get to the point where they're being haunted, they're just plot fodder. You know, for sure. It's a very apparent that the main story here is around the Warrens, and that they're the characters that you're meant to care the most about. But it's disappointing for me that the Smurls were kind of just swept under the rug, because I think that there was some interesting stuff. You've got 4 siblings, 2 are old, 2 are young. Like, there's some weird stuff going on with like the grandparents living there. And so I think that you could have done some cooler stuff from a family standpoint. But similar to what we just said with Judy, there's something with the Smurls that's just like all of a sudden that you don't see that doesn't make any sense. So at some point, there's just an ambulance outside the house, and they're like, oh yeah, somebody, like a ghost pushed grandma down the stairs. And then Grandma and Grandpa are not in the movie again for the rest of the fucking movie. And,
I just had to get them out of the house.
Yeah, and Brittany asked me, like, where were they? I was like, I guess Grandpa's at the hospital with Grandma. I feel like that's probably what's going on. But yeah, introduce these two characters as part of the family and then quickly write them out of the story, which was like, why even include them then?
Yeah, well, I have an answer to that question, but I also want to point this out, and I was going to bring it up because I feel like I bring this up in a lot of movie reviews, and so I just didn't want it to be a thing that I bring up every single time. But this is a very good example of too many cooks in the kitchen, and it feels like there was a different movie that they tried to make, and they kind of cut around to make the movie that we currently saw. So that was a perfect example of maybe there was something else there and they just left that scene in there to make it make sense to the grandparent. Like maybe that part was a bigger part of the third act, them not being there. And then they just cut it out of the movie, but they needed to keep that as the cohesive like tissue to explain why the grandparents were there. Anyways, one thing that I actually really liked about the grandparents and the family in general is one thing that always, and I think it is kind of like with horror movies, you kind of have to like get slasher movies, you kind of have to get cell phones out of the equation. Like you have to write an excuse why the person can't like use their cell phone or something like that. With this movie, with a haunted house movie, it feels like you have to write away why they can't just fucking leave. And so with this movie, I don't think that this movie is particularly well written in general, but one thing that they do a really good job of is in subtle ways, they set the stage for this movie. This family is a big family. They have a lot of people living in this house and they aren't super well off. Like without saying that, they do eventually say it in the movie, but like you see the dad pull up and he's got a shit car. There's a bunch of people in the house. Their electricity is going out because too many people are using like the hair dryer, and they do very subtle ways of kind of reminding you that they're not super well off. Like one of the daughters has confirmation, and their grandparents give her this shitty mirror, and her mom even says like, "Oh, I hope they didn't spend a lot," and they're like, "Oh no, we found it at like a garage sale or something like that." And so like there's subtle ways that they tell you without explicitly telling you that this family is not super well off. And so when the time comes and they do have to be like, hey, we can't leave. Like there's 8 of us. We can't just fucking pack up and leave. That's kind of like that seed has already been planted. And so I appreciated that part of it, but I totally agree. Like this is the B story for sure. And this is just the case to get Ed and Lorraine to deal with this other thing.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to performances.
Yeah, it's hard, man. I don't feel like there's anybody to call out necessarily for being like subpar in this movie, like we normally would with a movie we don't like. Like Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, they're good actors.
Yeah, they're fine.
They're fine. I think Mia Tomlinson is good, and she brings energy as Judy, and
100%.
You know, Ben Hardy, he was in Bohemian Rhapsody. He was the drummer in that movie, and not to say that he's good or bad in that movie, but it's like, oh, a familiar face, and he brings a different dynamic to the family because he's quirky, and so yeah, I didn't have problems with the performances per se.
No, I mean I wouldn't say I enjoyed the performances, except for Mia Tomlinson. I thought she was pretty good. Outside of that, there wasn't anybody that was bad. I will say that the 2 that played the young Ed and Lorraine, I thought they were pretty good for the 5 minutes that they're in this movie. Like they do a very good Patrick Wilson, and I've already forgotten her name. They do a good impression of them.
Yeah, great.
All right, so let's talk about the horror.
I mean, we've touched on it a little bit. It relies on jump scares. The one thing I do appreciate about the jump scares in this movie is that there are not accompanying loud noises to...
And there's no, like, fake outs.
Yeah. So they're jump scares, but even though all jump scares are cheap, it could be cheaper with, like, a loud orchestra moment whenever you were seeing these things. So I'll give credit to them for that. But there were some moments where I actually laughed. Specifically, there are these 3 ghosts at the house, right? That are the majority of the scares, and there's a demon involved as well. But there's
for no fucking reason.
Yeah, it's all like this weird lore stuff that they've never really explored before. But one of the ghosts is basically Michael Myers. Like, there's points in this movie where it becomes a slasher, and they're running from this guy with an axe, which, of course, right? But it's also like, is he able to kill you? Like,
I thought the exact same thing, because they show multiple scenes where somebody like is getting chased by them, and then somebody else walks in the room and there's nothing there. And it's like, is he a figment of their imagination because they can they're mediums and they can kind of see some of this stuff, or could he actually kill them?
Yeah. I have no idea. And that's it was weird. It was weird to not have those rules, and it was weird to make, like, you can do so many things with ghosts and demons, and you can be as creative as you want to be, and you're just going to make him, Jason Voorhees walking through the basement with an axe. It just seemed a little tired, and again, the character reactions, I couldn't tell what the outcome would be if he actually got to them. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it felt like they had a formula for this movie. And they said in their little formula, they were like, every 2 minutes and 13 seconds, there needs to be a scare. And so they created these monsters to do all of the scaring. But there wasn't any, first of all, it wasn't scary, like I said earlier. But also, it just it was very jump scary. And it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I don't think that they did a good job of, as you talked about just 2 seconds ago. I don't think that they did a good job of establishing exactly what's going on. There's a lot of shining like blood that happens in this movie, but then 2 seconds later, the character that should be covered in blood is no longer covered in blood. So it's again, that question is is it actually happening, or is it in their brain? I thought that the Judy and Lorraine stuff, having the same power, would be cool if they ever did anything with it. They kind of do something towards the end, but again, they're fighting a fucking mirror, literally fighting a mirror, pushing them down a hallway. It could have not been lamer. The final showdown is what you're waiting for this whole time. Again, that text dump at the very beginning said that this is the case that ended their career. They fought a fucking mirror. The case that ended their career. They defeated the mirror by them two touching the mirror, and that's it. So it was really fucking lame. And so that bums me out. And yeah, it just the ghosts and the scares were really lame, and who knew if they were going to actually do anything. And then the final showdown was really dumb. So I will say that there was a couple of cool shots in the movie that were done practically that I appreciated. I mean, not really necessarily horror related, but there was a scene early, or I guess it wasn't really early. It was kind of the mid point of the movie where you see Lorraine and she's kind of looking at something, and there's a toy merry-go-round, and it's this Dutch angle, and there's a lens flare, and I was oh, that's kind of artsy, kind of a cool shot. It doesn't really make a difference because I don't even remember what she was doing at the time, but there was a couple of scenes I was oh, that he actually knows what he's doing. He can kind of put a cool artistic flair to this movie. But yeah, I mean, the scares themselves were pretty lame.
Yeah, agree.
All right, so out of 5 stars, would you give Conjuring the Last Rites?
I think I'm going to go with a 2 out of 5 for this one.
I am also going to give it a 2. It's a pretty dumb movie.
Fair. Okay, nerd favorite. Are you ready for nerd favorite this week?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so obviously we just got done talking about a lot of ghosts and demons and ghost stories, and I think that it's probably pretty well established that neither of us, it is so late. Neither of us buy into that stuff anymore, or ever. Maybe for you at any point. I used to believe it when I was a kid, I guess. But I still think that ghost stories are fun, and they're a part of growing up and childhood, and passing along ghost stories from person to person is a rite of passage in a way. So I just want to know your favorite ghost story, and you can do whatever you want with that. in Evansville, specifically where I grew up, where you currently live, there are a few things that are quote unquote haunted. So like Willard Library is a big one. There's this whole, mystery of the Gray Lady or whatever. But there was one that I don't want to say resonated with, but one that kind of freaked me out more. And it was because it was closer to where I lived in Evansville with my parents. But, and you've probably driven past it before. It's on Baney Camp Road, but there's this old brick building. It's apartments now, but in 1908, it was a tuberculosis hospital. And so they basically had this area where they would essentially segregate all of the folks that had tuberculosis. And as you can imagine, lots of death, lots of tragedy there. But the building stood the test of time. And I guess there were other buildings and things that were since torn down, but they turned this old tuberculosis hospital into an apartment building. And as you can imagine, lots and lots of stories about it being haunted and about paranormal encounters there. But I just think that it was always really creepy because it's just like right there on the road, and like I said, close to my house, and the fact that it used to be a hospital where a lot of people died and people just like live there now. It's strange to me, but that was always one that stuck with me as a kid.
Yeah, so I don't really have a great story for you because, as you alluded to at the beginning of this segment, I don't believe in ghosts at all. Like, I don't think I've gotten scared at movies, like horror movies when I was a kid, of course, but it was more like the jump scare stuff. Like the actual like ghost stuff didn't really bother me. And that's kind of probably why I don't really like exorcist movies. Don't really get me that much either. It's just like the paranormal Norman stuff just doesn't really get me. It's actually a point of contention between my wife and I because she likes that kind of stuff, and I just like I just don't get it. Like I've never really gotten into that kind of stuff, and probably why I didn't really like this movie that much either, the Conjuring movies. So I would say, and this is kind of just my only, it's not really even my story, but I remember one of my buddies, Mike from The Obsessive Viewer, again, we roomed together for most of our college career. We actually were roommates. And I remember him and his girlfriend at the time were obsessed. Like they would watch Ghost Adventures and stuff like that. They were obsessed with that kind of stuff. They would like go to graveyards and shit. Like they were fucking weird. And they were convinced that our apartment, like the bedroom that we were living in, was haunted. And I remember them, one day I came home from class and Jeff, my good friend who's been a guest on the podcast, I'm legally obligated to say that, he was already like there. And so I could tell just like when they started telling me this story that he kind of like gave me like an eye roll because he had heard the story before and he knew probably that it wasn't going to go well when they started telling me, but they were convinced because a hanger started like swinging a little bit in our apartment. And I was like, maybe it's a spider or something. Like I kept like saying, they're like, no, it's not. And then me and Jeff just started like busting their balls about it. And then I don't remember how we got there, but eventually we got to ghost spider, that maybe it was a ghost spider. And so we just kept we would essentially bully them every so often. We would be like, something would fall off the counter or something, or like the ghost spider is back. And so I still bust his balls about the ghost spider. So yeah, we just bullied one of our good friends about a ghost story that him and his girlfriend really believed. And I thought it was really dumb.
You crazy kids and your college antics.
Yeah, I'm not a great friend. That story does not shine a great light on me, but I just like that stuff just doesn't resonate with me.
Are you really good friends with someone if you don't bust their balls about stuff like that?
I mean, 100%. You got to bust balls.
For sure.
All right, so that is it for episode 526 of the Nerd You're Looking For podcast. Of course, we hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe, rate, review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, basically whatever podcast you're listening to us on right now. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Those are both at The Nerds Podcast. Check out all of our content on our website, thenerdspodcast.com, and finally email us at thenerdyourlookingfor@gmail.com. For Patrick Kuhn,
Tyler Hunt.
we are the Nerd You're Looking For. Take it easy, nerds.
Later, guys.